Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to Abnormal Voyages. My name is David, and today we find ourselves in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. As we travel around gathering cemetery safari episodes, sometimes we run across graves that are so special and so unique, we know that they deserve episodes of their very own. This is the beginning of a new series where we celebrate a position that only 45 people in the entire history of the world have ever had, that of the United States President. We begin today with Mr. James Monroe.
We're going to a place that you've never heard of before. It's Abnormal Voyages. You're gonna learn something new. We're gonna open new doors. It's Abnormal Voyages.
James Monroe was the 5th President of the United States, born April 28, 1758, and died July 4th, 1831. James Monroe was the very last of the presidents that was considered one of the Founding Fathers. He was very popular in his day. When he first ran in 1816, he won with 68% of the vote. And then after, in 1820, when he ran for re-election, he ran completely unopposed. Monroe was responsible for the negotiation of the Louisiana Purchase and is responsible for the United States acquiring Florida from Spain in 1819. At the time, he was able to purchase the land for a mere $5 million. That was definitely a lot more money back then, but still quite a deal. Though of all his accomplishments, he is probably best known as the writer of the Monroe Doctrine. This policy helped ensure that nobody from the European side would try to colonize in the Western Hemisphere, and agreed at the same time that the United States would stay out of affairs that had to do with just Europe. This went a long way to solidifying the young country, and is still a document that we look back at now, but the politics kind of flip-flop back and forth over if we get into something or not. An interesting distinction that James Monroe has is he is the last president who was never photographed in his lifetime. Along with the other founding fathers, James Monroe did die on 4th of July, just like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams before him, who both died on 4th of July 5 years earlier than Monroe in 1826. Overall, James Monroe was considered a great president. The people loved him, and he really put forth some great ideas that truly built the country and still resonate with us today. And even though this grave is almost 200 years old now, it still holds up and is a great memorial to a great man. For our next president, we actually stay right here in Hollywood Cemetery. It was a very popular choice for presidents, apparently. Located just a few feet away from James Monroe, we find the 10th President of the United States, John Tyler. Tyler was born March 29th in 1790 and died January 18th, 1862. He has the honor of being the very first vice president who took over the presidency after a president died. In this case, that president was William Henry Harrison. Due to this quirk, some of his detractors actually dubbed him his accidency. John Tyler's time in office was very interesting. He was a member of the Whig Party, but once he was fully in office, he started to enact things that the Whig Party didn't agree with, and they actually ended up expelling him from the party while he was still president. He was also a very strong believer in manifest destiny for the United States, and as a matter of fact, in his last days of office, Texas and Florida were both admitted as states into the Union. The most bizarre fact about John Tyler, though, is that before his life ended, he actually joined the Confederate Congress. He was appointed to it, but passed away days before being officially sworn in. Due to this, he is the only president that was not buried with an American flag. Rather, when his time came, he was buried with a Confederate flag, and most of the Union had nothing to do with mourning his death. Abraham Lincoln was president at the time and did not even make a customary presidential address of his passing. He also has the distinction of being the president with the most children, 15. Leaving Virginia behind us for a little bit, we travel to Canton, Ohio, where we find the final resting place of the 25th president, Mr. William McKinley. He was born January 29, 1843, and died September 14, 1901, when he was one of 4 United States presidents that have been assassinated. Though his life may have been cut short, William McKinley experienced quite a lot in his time. As a young man, McKinley fought in the Civil War and rose to the level of major. After the war, he came back home to Ohio and started up a law firm. After a bit, he decided politics was more his speed, so he jumped in and served 14 years in Congress before leaving that to become the governor of Ohio. William McKinley was the president during the Spanish-American War, and by the end of it, the United States had gained possession of Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam. On top of that, Cuba was given its independence. McKinley was pretty popular among the people, and when he ran, was elected by a landslide of about 600,000 votes, which back then was a pretty big amount. That fateful day when he was assassinated, he was giving a speech at a Pan-American exposition to a crowd of about 50,000 people. After being shot, the crowd quickly ran and jumped on the assassin and began beating him. The president himself told them to stop and not to harm this man. Even while going through his own trauma, McKinley showed compassion. Though the bullet itself wasn't quite what killed him, he was rushed to a hospital and 8 days later passed away due to gangrene. Interestingly enough, William McKinley was the very first president to ride in a car, and on top of that, though they are no longer in circulation, his face happens to grace the $500 bill. He was a great president taken from us much too soon. For our final stop on today's presidential cemetery safari, we head to Greenville, Tennessee, to the Andrew Johnson National Cemetery. As the name may have given away, we're here to visit the final resting place of Andrew Johnson, who was the 17th President of the United States. Born December 29, 1808, and died July 31st, 1875, Andrew Johnson is another who took over from the preceding president, as he was Abraham Lincoln's vice president. As you can imagine, the country was still greatly in turmoil after the effects of the Civil War coming to an end. Possibly in part because of that, Andrew Johnson is unfortunately remembered as one of the worst presidents that we've had so far. As a matter of fact, Andrew Johnson was so disliked that Congress actually voted to impeach him. The vote came out to 126 in favor as opposed to 47 against it. He only managed to not get convicted by the Senate by one single vote. He came that close to being kicked out. But, thanks to that one vote, he was able to fulfill the entire term of office. It could be argued that Andrew Johnson just never really was presidential material. He was actually illiterate up until the age of 17 when he met who would become his future wife, Eliza McArdle. She taught him how to read, write, and do math. Part of the reason that Lincoln even brought him on as vice president was that he was hoping somebody from the South with some more ideals closely in line with how they felt would help bring the country together. As a matter of fact, the same people who had Abraham Lincoln assassinated originally planned to also get Andrew Johnson that same night. However, they failed, and he went on to be president. Well, adventurers, that's all the time we have for this cemetery safari. If you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and maybe even check out our Patreon and Discord. My name is David, and this has been Abnormal Voyages. Thanks for tagging along. We'll see you in the next one.